we can understand the objective factors, and we can understand the subjective factors. And in any and notice, these are blank. I'm not telling you what the current ones are. This is a matter of structural dialectics, which is then applied to history. So what are the objective factors? Well, again, there's the factors for revolution and there's the factors against revolution. The objective factors for or against revolution are capitalism, a structure of exploitation, a structure of alienation, the very structural arrangement, not intentional, of a factory system, the very structural system that makes us compete with each other for jobs, that makes us compete with each other for a wage and helps us drive down wages. It is the very structural system that makes us see the products that we can buy, but does not show us, not because of any necessarily nefarious intention, but just because of the structure of capitalism, does not show us the people murdered to bring that product to us. Okay, this is very important. The objective factors are not intentional. But there's also subjective factors. What makes me compete with a fellow worker is also what makes me, in my own self-interest, my own objective self-interest under capitalism, want to form a union. It is my isolation and alienation as an objective factor that makes me seek the company of others. It is the oppression of capitalism that makes me want to revolt against them, to smash, to break, to destroy. In one, massive Promethean surge against the entire heavens to say no. All of this, however impressive it may be, is still only an objective factor. So this is a key mistake that a lot of people make about Marxism. Yes, revolt, not revolution, revolt is built into the capitalist structure. Capitalism engenders its own revolts. That is not a revolution. The inevitability of revolts is not the inevitability of revolution. And we should never mistake that structural feature of revolt for the historical inevitability of the overthrow of capital, of revolution, and of communism. So what then are the subjective factors? Those are the factors that actually play a part as a subject. Now, capitalists investing in the stock market can cause a crash without ever intending to. But it is particular subjective agents that decide to invade Iraq. It is particular subjective agents, for example, who decide that all of our problems in capitalism are either because of the Jews, or because of the blacks, or because of the Mexicans, and then start pogroms against them, or round them up and shoot them, or institute paramilitary organizations to catch them and deport them, right? These are subjective elements, intentional forces. But just as there are intentional forces of fascism, of military domination, of police intervention that are intended to crush essentially any revolutionary spirit, there are also sometimes revolutionary subjects. But this entails a political subject that can express political will. This entails a political subject that is organized, that it can move as a subject, as order, as discipline. And the name for the subject in politics is the party, the Revolutionary Party. And of course, you can see then how dialectical materialism is essential to understanding the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary struggles. Now, here's the thing about the party. It needs to be a subjective force. It needs to be actively willing revolution. So, May 68. For those of you who don't know, in May 68, a bunch of workers and a bunch of students got together and were so angry that they rioted, they striked, and it looked as though the French government was going to collapse. But the major labor unions and the French Communist Party did not support these revolts. The French Communist Party's line was, no, it's not objectively the time to overthrow capitalism. So we don't encourage this, we're not going to support this, and we're not going to organize this. And of course this leads to the Situationists and the Anarchists and the Maoists, who basically say, well, then we're done with the French Communist Party. Oh, I'll take questions at the end. Now, here's the thing. The structural dialectic of French imperialism in Algeria, of the Fordist state, where you have unions more or less taking workers, or more or less taking care of workers, but still the continual exploitation of workers in factories, and the bureaucratization of both the factory and labor and the unions, objectively led to revolt. And May 68 is a good example of massive amounts of objective revolt. But unfortunately, even for all the objective damage done to capitalism, all the factories smashed, all the cars flipped, all the windows broken, subjectively, those reactionary forces in the government, de Gaulle, the labor unions, and yes, the French Communist Party, remain completely intact. And because that objective rising of the people had no subjective power, there was no party, no revolutionary party that could lead them, ultimately it was once again caught up into the structural dialectic of capitalism and became a historical, right, in the historical dialectic, a failure. So this may be a little bit confusing. I'll do one more example between the objective and the subjective, and then what I think this means for us. I just came up with this example, and it's very clear. The objective destruction of revolutionary activity done by policing, and the subjective damage done by particular groups engaged in counter-revolution. So I don't personally have anything against the police, and I think the leftist stance on police needs to be a lot more nuanced than it is, because most of them are, not driving Ferraris and taking home huge checks, and they're lucky to have a good pension when they retire or get shot or some other injury. So I don't mean to degrade working class individuals, but policing objectively prevents revolution. You are not going to appropriate your factory and put it under worker control, or appropriate a big screen TV, because it's all basically stolen anyway, and distribute that to the people when there's a cop standing there. And the cop doesn't have to intend to stop you. In fact, that's the real point of the police. They don't have to intend to stop you. Think of when you're driving. How often do you slow down as soon as you see the cop? Whether he's looking for you or waiting for you or not. The very objective presence of the police leads to just that, policing, to an order. The capitalist structural dialectic of order. But there's something different in, for example, COINTELPRO. And for those of you who don't know, COINTELPRO is a counterintelligence program that the FBI instituted in the 60s. And what they did as subjects, as an acting counter-revolutionary subject, is they literally began targeting leftists like Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X, like any radicals, like any student organizations, and began or Black Panthers. And they didn't just police them. They didn't just make their presence known. They actively worked to disrupt the activities through threats, through paid thugs to beat them up or assassinate them